The Trek Geeks Podcast Network is proud to have Fansets as its presenting sponsor. Fansets is the place for amazing pin collectibles with over 200 officially licensed Star Trek pins and new releases every month.
Stay tuned for a special discount code good on your next order at fansets.com just for Discovering Trek listeners. Fansets. Our pins have character.
From deep in the bowels of the USS Cerritos, welcome listeners, cadets, junior officers, and all-around non-coms to the podcast that barely goes where any podcast has gone before. What are Boimler, Mariner, Tendi, and Rutherford up to this week? Well, let's find out. My name is Dan Davidson, and this is Discovering Trek Lower Decks. Thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Discovering Trek Lower Decks, presented by Fansets. Each week, we're going to break down the latest Lower Decks episode and have a whole lot of fun doing it. We like to consider ourselves the finest waste extraction team on the USS Cerritos because when we aren't cleaning it up, we are certainly dishing it out. And just who might my crew members be, you may ask? Well, let's bring them on right now. First up, you can hear her right here on the Trek Geeks Podcast Network as one of the co-hosts of the wildly popular Rewind, The Hot Mess Star Trek podcast, and she has recently been named the official embroidery expert for Trek Geeks. She is the lovely and talented Sara. Welcome aboard, Sara. How are you?
Bonjour! I am talented and talented, apparently.
Wow, talented. Yes, you know you're going to have screwed up words when Dan's on a podcast, so thank you for pointing that out to our millions of adoring fans, or the dozen or so that we might have. Next up, anyway, he is a longtime friend and producer of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. His voice may grate on you, but trust me, you'll get used to it after a couple of years. He is the beautiful and vivacious Kasey Shafsky. Hey, Kasey.
Hey there, how are you?
Wow, that's grating. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to fix that one on the old edit. How you doing, man?
I can give it to you again.
No, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
And finally, this guy needs no introduction. He is the executive producer and co-host on the Trek Geeks podcast. And as always, he is my brother in Trek, my dear friend, and someone you never want to get drunk with. He is Bill Smith. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, buddy. That is actually true. You do not want to get drunk. You don't want to get drunk with me.
No.
Because it's going to wind up like Hangover 4.
That's not good. That's not good.
No.
I have gotten drunk with you, and believe me, nobody wants to have to live through that like I did.
That's true. That's very true.
It's great to have everybody here. Week 2 of Lower Decks is in the books. Envoys. It was a lot of fun. We're going to get into some great discussion. And Bill, before you dazzle us with the patented Discovering Trek 6-sentence recap, why don't you remind everyone how they can make first contact about Envoys and Lower Decks?
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
On both Twitter and Facebook, you can find us at Discovering Trek. In both of those places, you can leave us comments, questions, or even tell us what your ideal Lower Decks job would be aboard the Cerritos. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can do so by going to our website at trekgeeks.com and clicking on the giant blue button. But please do remember, though, that any comments you leave us could be used in a future episode of Discovering Trek. Dan.
Whoa. Okay. Thank you, Mr. American Express boy.
Black alert. Black alert.
From here on in, this episode of Discovering Trek contains spoilers. So if you haven't watched episode 2 of Star Trek Lower Decks, stop listening right now. Head on over to CBS All Access or wherever you watch Lower Decks. Watch the episode, then head back on over to Discovering Trek. Otherwise, you run the risk of finding out plot developments and character details for Envoys. It's time for the best recap in the galaxy. It's the 6-sentence recap starring the one and only Bill Smith. 6 sentences, Bill, starting now. Go. And action.
Okay, here we go. Mariner and Boimler transport a Klingon General to a conference. Rutherford looks for a new job to spend some time with Tendi, so he doesn't have to spend as much time in the Jeffries tubes. The Klingon General steals the shuttlecraft, stranding Boimler and Mariner, and they go on a search for him, encountering lots of aliens and lots of problems. Rutherford tries out a whole lot of new jobs, none of which bring him the joy of the tubes, and I swear that's not dirty. Mariner helps Boimler realize he's cut out for Starfleet. Rutherford returns to his real passion, engineering, and spends some time with Tendi in the tubes. There we go. That's 6.
Wow, you can count, and you did it. I'm very impressed.
Oh, thanks, Kasey.
Nice job, Bill. I'm a little bummed we didn't get a bonus 7th sentence like last week, but I won't hold it against you this time. So, you've been warned.
Oh, thank you.
Next up, it's time to hit on all the references in the episode to other Treks, point out Easter eggs, and all around other cool things. It's Kasey's Cornea Corner. Kasey, please, take it away.
Would you look at that?
Why, thank you, Sara. Gosh, this week we had energy beings, Bajorans, Borgs, blast shields, Andorian blades, and Boimler almost banging. It was kind of crazy.
Didn't expect that one.
I didn't either.
That's why I don't give you my copy beforehand. Well, we start off where, we see an energy being entering the Cerritos. And hey, maybe this is a reference to TNG's The Child, maybe TOS Day of the Dove. Who knows? We find out that Mariner has no problem bullying a creature that we don't know a lot about to get herself some cool swag. When we're cruising in, the being flies into Captain Freeman, as she's walking down the corridor, and it screams, "Die mortal." Is this some foreshadowing? Does it mean anything? Because then we don't hear anything else about the energy being through this episode. We've got the return of the TNG dress uniform. I hate that uniform. I just hate it. It's And we also find out that some Klingons have matching luggage. Mariner inside the shuttlecraft is on her 3rd of 4 bowls of ramen, easily getting 135% of the daily value of sodium. And did you know that in 1958, Momofuku Ando invented instant noodles?
No, I didn't know that.
Fun fact.
Hey,
I
don't screw with Momofuku.
The value we're adding here on Discovering Trek is just amazing.
Educational show, baby. Woo! We cruised through what looked to me like a mammoth engineering section.
It was amazing.
That impressed me far more than any TNG set did. I looked at that and go, yeah, that looks like something that is quite impressive and would power a starship. Mariner dreams of Khan and soft Corinthian leather. And it was awesome dreams. We meet General Corinne. Now, is this the one-eyed Klingon Mariner mentioned in episode 1? Maybe. I don't know. I got a feeling, though, Klingon optometrists are in demand and making bank because of all the stabby, sharpie. We find out that Mariner gets 4 weeks of shore leave on the Cerritos. And in this episode, we get to visit Little Kronos, Little Andoria, Little Ryza, and meet a ton of different aliens that we've seen all over the place. Apparently, Section 31 speedwalks everywhere. Because it looks so damn cool.
That explains why Sloan always looks so fit.
Doesn't it? It does. We get Lurians, Morn-like creature from DS9, Aurelians from TAS, Kalons from TNG, Andorians from TOS. We get a Vendorian shapeshifter from TAS, Ferengi, a Taxor. We maybe get Rockman from Trek 5, the best part of that movie. Maybe. Then also, we get to see a lot of different stuff of weaponry that is from TOS all the way on. I dug the Andorian Ice Miner's blade that just looks like you're going to be gutting fish any second now. And then at the very end, well, close to the end, we get kind of a sad reference that I thought was from Boimler to DS9's The Sound of Her Voice.
That was awesome.
Yes.
I really liked that. Yep.
And I found this episode to be pretty emotional in callbacks that it was bringing into things that we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys see anything
I have a
else?
quick question. So was the energy being, the one that was going to make a feast of their misery, which I love that line, by the way, was the energy being responsible for its warp time?
It could be. I mean, it is now in the captain. It's like, die, mortal.
I was a little concerned that it pooped out a tricorder. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and a battery.
And a battery. Can't forget the battery. Yeah, absolutely.
And the tricorder was square. That had to hurt.
And purple. Kasey. One of the things that I liked about one of the things I caught, which I thought was really great, and we talked to Mike McMahon earlier this week, and he talked about how the episode Lower Decks and TNG was really what fuels this show. And at one point, Mariner and the Klingon are talking about the adventures they had on the planet Jaxa. And I had to wonder if that was some kind of reference to Ceto Jaxa from that episode, who gave her life to help with the mission that she was on. I thought that was really cool, and I like to think that it was. So that's just me.
I think you're right. That makes total sense.
Oh, that'll be it. Thank you. That happens every once in a while. I don't know. Anything else? What did you guys catch? You catch anything specific, Sarah, that Kasey didn't mention yet?
No, but I was watching it again today for the third time, and I was desperately pausing and looking to see if I could find anything that would really be rare, but I didn't. Everything that Kasey touched on was stuff that I saw. So it's fun though. It's like a puzzle. I like it.
It is. It is like a puzzle.
Yeah.
What about you, Bill? Anything interesting?
I love that among the alien species we see, I mean, of course, there's a Ferengi, which looks a little more TNG Season 1 than, say, Quark Season 7.
Yep.
But we get a Kalon, the alien race from the TNG episode Half a Life.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be, notoriously isolationist and maybe borderline xenophobic to some degree. But, he's just sort of kicking around there. I mean, I never would have thought that we'd ever see that race again. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Kalon we saw originally played by David Ogden Stiers, and of course one by Michelle Forbes.
Right.
So a great deep cut alien, which makes me happy.
One of the things that I thought was really cool about the Ferengi is when he was pretending to be a bad guy, he had the Season 1 TNG look with the fingers and the human. But then when he was talking to Mariner on the pad, he was more Quarkish in terms of how they had evolved with Deep Space Nine. He had the nice outfit on, and he had a monocle and all that stuff. Yeah,
he's the Monopoly man. Really?
There's so much eye reference in this episode. I didn't see that coming.
I think that is the second reference to Ace Ventura we've had in just a couple of weeks. So
it really is.
Alrighty then.
That's pretty good.
I dig that Bill caught another MASH reference. So it's 2 for 2, baby.
Nice job, Kasey. Full of stuff this week on the corner.
Oh, I'm full of it. Mm-hmm. Folks, we want to take a moment to give a big shout out to our dear friends over at Fansets. As always, they are the exclusive sponsor of Discovering Trek, and as always, they are hard at work to bring you the latest and greatest pins to add to your collections.
As you all know by now, when it comes to the highest quality of products and customer service, you don't need to look any further than Fansets. Lou, John, and the entire Fansets crew are fans, so they know that their product and service has to be the best of the best, and it is.
You know, it really is, Sarah, and their latest batch of new releases are really just awesome. And I'm not just talking about Star Trek either. Oh, no. Brand new this week is the awesome-looking Batcopter from their new Batman 66 collection. Yeah, I know, right? The Huntress joins the very popular DC Bombshells collection. Nice. Yes, Deathstroke and The Question are now available for you DC Comics fans. And Admiral Nelson from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea has joined the ranks of the Irwin Allen collection. That is a deep cut right there. But for us Star Trek fans, we are so excited to welcome Mako Soldier Major Hayes, as well as, get this, the full-size Voyager/DS9 Delta Comm badge. This one is gorgeous, folks, and you will want to get this one before it sells out. But just remember, these Deltas are pins and not intended for cosplay.
That is a great list of new releases, Dan. And even better is that our friends at Fansets have a great offer for Discovering Trek listeners. So listen up. If you would like to save 15% off your entire order at fansets.com, enter the special discount code LOWERDECKS at checkout. That's Lower Decks in all capital letters with no spaces for some great savings. And of course, don't forget, if you spend $30 or more, you're going to get free shipping at fansets.com.
Fansets. Our pins have character, and we thank our friends at Fansets for being the exclusive sponsor of Discovering Trek.
Next up, it's time for us to sit back and listen to Sara as she records her ensign's log. We'd like to think that she brings some actual intelligence and an intellectual quality to this particular part of the podcast, given the rest of us.
Amen.
I mean, after all, where else are you going to get a fantastic quote of the week, as well as thoughts from the absolute smartest member of this Lower Decks crew? So, Sara, it's all up to you. No pressure.
Nope, not happening. I refuse. I am here to have fun and to talk about some really good quotes.
Space, the final frontier.
Because it was no longer Starfleet.
So, this is a huge victory for the good guys.
You know, I'm really easy to get along with most of the time. But I don't like bullies, and I don't like threats, and I don't like you.
Let's make sure that history never forgets the name. Enterprise.
Hit it.
Once again, I didn't pick one. I picked multiple because this show is killing it with the one-liners. It is so funny, and it's funnier than I even anticipated it to be. I knew it was going to be a comedy, and there was going to be some laughs, but I am, like, busting a gut. So, here are some of my favorites, and let's discuss. We have Boimler. We're like the same age. Back in what day? I love that when he is talking to Mariner and how she's got this whole history with the Klingons and all these battles she's been on. I mean, it's such a simple sentence that gives you a really good view into that total difference between the two of them. How he's book smart, she's street smart, and she's got this whole life where she's just been doing all these things. And he's like, what? Where was I? Like, dude, it's just so good. We also have another great line by Boimler. It's to conserve energy. Section 31 does this. Now, we already talked about this, but I just thought that was a great little line, and kind of maybe a wink and a nod saying, can we have this in the Section 31 show, please? Like, who wouldn't want to see Michelle Yeoh, like, power walking, like, Olympic style with the hips and the arms, like, taking care of business. We're going the same speed. Like, I just love that. Oh. And then we had the ensign screaming out, all the ship's children have been ejected into space.
What a great reference to that kid episodes never work in Star Trek.
Exactly. I wanted to quote every single line she said where it started off with the kindergartners and then on to the next ones. I thought that was so clever. And then the fact that that's never happened in 1,000 different simulations just goes to show that Rutherford was not necessarily meant to be in that area. Yep. But he may have been meant to be in security because we had the smorgasbord. Computer, initiate combat simulation smorgasbord. As soon as I heard that, I was like, I want the t-shirt. I want the plate set. I want the lamp. I want everything that's got smorgasbord on it. I thought that was such a great play on words. And lastly, for the number one, I went with the Ferengi at the end saying, Mariner, was I convincing enough for you, human? Yes. And I chose this as a great quote because it just sums up what happened in that last couple of scenes, is that Mariner took one for the team because she wanted her guy to have his moment in 10-4, to brag that he knew something, because when he threw down that comm badge and she saw it and she didn't like that reaction, she wanted to do something to make him want to be a part of where he's at, where he's meant to be. And to see that little line and that little conversation at the end just goes to show that friendship, what it means to her, and what he'll realize it means to him too down the road.
I like the fact that it showed the humanity, and that she really has more depth to her than she may initially look like she does. I thought that was
and
really
the Ferengi too. Because we've always been, every season of a different show, we've been warned about the Ferengi, but you get such a great character in Deep Space Nine, and they'll hear you see one in the cartoon, you're thinking, oh, here we go, it's going to be the TNG Ferengi. But nope.
Exactly.
He was helping out a friend.
Bill, what about you? Do you have a particular quote that you really enjoyed this week?
My favorite has to be the one from the cold open. The "I shall make a feast of your misery," because I can see myself. I can see myself using that line with trolls and gatekeepers on social media, because I'm going to make I'm going to feast on their misery of my love for this show. Nice. They find a way to work in these elements, and we'll talk about that more in Deck 47. But what a great line.
I got to say that I had two. One we already talked about, and I'll get to that in a second. But Mariner's Dream, buried alive, right? Marooned for eternity, moons of Nebula. Oh my god, this is great. Wrath of Khan thrown in right there. It was just awesome. But Sarah, you already talked about it. But computer initiate combat simulation smorgasbord. That whoever does the voice for the security chief,
he's great.
I absolutely love. And I got remind me in case I forget. I have something to say about the security chief when we get to Portal 7 that I don't want to forget. So make sure you remind me.
All right,
Kasey, what do you have for any special quotes?
I gotta say, once again, we had a nice "my bones." It's like, okay, maybe this might become a running gag. I don't know. We'll find out. But I dug it.
Nice.
I've loaded the appropriate decon gel into compartment B.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's obvious that there's going to be a lot of goop in Lower Decks. We've seen it for 2 weeks in a row now, so in this segment, we're going to try and get a grip on all of that goop. And there was a lot of it flying around this week, and Kasey's trying to impersonate it right now on video, so it's a good thing that we don't have that to share. There was a lot of ramen noodle juice flying around that shuttlecraft. It was everywhere. I'm surprised things weren't shorting out.
Ramen?
All over the place. Ramen. I don't eat it, so I don't know how to pronounce it.
Can you speak?
So good.
Wow. Have you ever listened to me podcasting?
Yeah, I was hoping you had improved.
There was an awful lot of Klingon blood wine on that shuttlecraft, and it was going all over the place. And that was another good quote that we didn't talk about. When did you guys get flagons? That was
I love that one too. That was a great one.
And I really think we had a lot more Klingon puke than we really needed to see this week. That was going, and then he puked on himself, and I'm surprised. You can choke on your own vomit. That was dangerous. Right?
And he pooped on his sword. Man.
He did. Yes, we didn't see that. Thankfully, yeah. Lots of disgustingness in this week's episode. But I gotta say, I hope it happens every week. I really do.
Brings up a lot of questions.
It does.
A lot of questions. What has happened to the Empire, for God's sake?
Yeah, how is it still an empire if these are the top-notch dudes? Maybe they're not.
Right.
And you're like,
that shuttle's got to have a replicator, because how did Mariner get 4 tubs of ramen noodles from wherever she replicated them to the shuttle bay?
Yeah, and the flagons.
And the flagons.
Flagons.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah. I liked how we also had, it's not part of the Decon Chamber, but in that scene, I liked how the Batleth was once again a dangerous weapon, because we haven't really seen it as a dangerous weapon until Lower Decks. So that was
stabby all the time.
Let's I'm kind of wondering what we're in store for next week with the goop, but we'll just have to wait and see.
What more can Boimler be drenched in is what I'm going to ask. Jack Quaid on The Boys, because he plays Boimler, gets covered in blood seemingly at least a couple of times a season.
Yep.
And now Boimler is getting covered with all kinds of biomolecular matter. And I'm going to start an online petition to give Jack Quaid a break, man.
Also, I just thought of it when you brought up the blood. Like in the holodeck simulation for the bridge, the 2 simulations that Rutherford did, they all got blood all over him when he smashed into the time rift and then the asteroid and jettisoned all the kids out into space. So blood, puke, juice, all kinds of stuff.
Is that the Janeway protocol?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering.
Blood out of anything? It's like, ouch.
Well, folks, as we move along, it's time for us to get in the turbo lift and head all the way down to the lowest of the lower decks to discuss some other elements of this week's episode in Deck 47, sponsored by our dear friends over at Science Division.
They're the makers of the galaxy's first interactive tribble that you can control with your very own smartphone. These brand new tribbles will be an incredible addition to your Star Trek collection, and you can find out more at sciencediv.com. Science Division. Trouble's never been this fun.
Okay, so I'm going to start it off because I didn't want to forget about it because I would forget, and I know none of you would have reminded me like I asked you to.
Hey, Dan, it's time to say what you wanted to say. So we're reminding you.
Security.
Thanks, Kasey.
You're welcome.
All right, now I'm not the brightest bulb in the box. I know
we
that.
Know.
Everybody knows that. Yes. Aww. And I got to say, I watched this episode. We had early screening to it, so I got to watch it a couple of weeks ago, and I did not realize until episode 2 that the chief of security was Bajoran. And the only time I realized he was Bajoran was when he watched Rutherford kick the Borg's ass and said, "By the prophets." And I'm like, oh my God, he's got the earring. He's got the ridged nose. I never noticed it.
I think
because there's so much going on in these shows. I'm like, and Bill knows what I'm like when I go to Disney World. I'm like, oh my God, look at everything. And this is what I'm like with Lower Decks. I didn't even know it was.
Dude, you're like that when you go to work.
He's like that when he looks at a pillow.
That's just the parking lot at Disneyland.
Yeah. No kidding.
So I love it. I think it's great.
That's why this is the Star Trek Universe companion, everybody. That's you come here for the hot takes. That's the hottest of them all. Right.
Nobody
there.
talks Trek like we talk.
No one.
Thank God.
Okay, you know what? That's all I'm talking about in Deck 47. Sarah, what do you got?
Well, I only knew he was Bajoran because when I did the embroidery of him, I was like, oh my gosh, these fine lines I have to do for the nose bridge. I was like, nope, he's human. Not in this version, he's human. One thing I didn't talk about in the quotes much, but I really enjoyed just the Rutherford storyline. And I loved how everyone reacted when he was like, I'm going to go somewhere else. You're like, oh, great for you. They'll be lucky to have you. Oh, bears. Like just the fact that they're like a cub of bears that are working in security. I thought that was great. And the fact that he did it to spend time with Tindy. I think that's a cute little I think something's happening. So yeah, I thought that was a really great little sub story that I hadn't touched on. And it was a great way to kind of just see how some of the other areas work. He's definitely not meant to be in the medical area for sure. That poor guy was, those percentages were going up. So get him out of there fast. And I think he's where he needs to be.
Speaking of the sick bay scene, and we'll get to Kasey and Bill's comments in a second. I gotta say it was a short scene, but it was another great scene with the Doctor. This character is really great.
Yeah, she's got that
grit to her that really works for the look of her character. And I realized too that she was in 40-Year-Old Virgin, if anybody's a big fan of that.
Step Brothers.
She's really good in that.
And Step
Brothers, yep. She's awesome. So I think they got the right pick. I mean, they've really done a really great job on all of the people that they've got for the cast. Absolutely. So Kasey, what do you got, buddy?
What I saw, what I thought was really interesting, and Sarah brought it up, is I saw, that Rutherford is a little smitten going on there, but he's more smitten with engineering.
Yes.
And especially at the end when he's just looking at the conduit little section in there in the Jeffries tube, he's just like,
so pretty.
He's so in love, and that he really digs it. And then also the very supportive nature of the upper deckers when he keeps saying he wants to move to a different area, where you go, maybe these guys aren't dicks after all, and that could be that because they're quite supportive. I mean, they cheer him in engineering, cheer him, and it's like you go. That's a nice little twist, so we can see that there's depth to this. It's not just like, it's better down here. They don't care about us. It's like, there's layers.
Layers. You just made me think of Shrek, but that's a different story. Bill?
Well, starships are like onions.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm glad you got that reference.
I think the thing that I appreciate the most about this particular episode and Lower Decks overall is that there is great heart in this series. I've seen a lot of comments online. I was curious as to what the trolls would have to say. So I went looking at one point, and they're like, this show just doesn't understand Star Trek. And if you watch this episode and you think that this show doesn't get what Star Trek's about, then I'm not so sure you understand Star Trek. Because in this episode, we see people celebrating others and trying to build them up. Especially as Rutherford's on his quest. I mean, I'm happy anytime Paul Scheer shows up in anything.
Yes.
But the fact that we get him in a Star Trek animated series is awesome. And I really enjoy his chief engineer Billups. And, because Billups sounds like he's going to be really upset that Rutherford wants to leave. And he's like wicked excited. And he starts to cheer like you guys were talking about. And everywhere Rutherford goes, people demonstrate, oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Hey, good luck. You're going to do great. You're going to do awesome. And then you see that also with Mariner and Boimler, where she goes to a little more greater lengths to show Boimler that he matters and that he's where he belongs. And I think that's the overriding message of this episode is be where you belong. Do what brings you joy. In Boimler's case, it's being a Starfleet fanboy. In Rutherford's case, it's being in the tubes and chasing down problems in EPS conduits. I think that there's a great lesson here, and I'm glad that this show is taking time to teach those and to really stand up to the heart of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. And if anybody doesn't realize the passion and the knowledge of Star Trek that these people have, take a listen to the discussion that we had with Mike McMahon this week, because it's amazing getting that insight from somebody who works on the show and the creator of the show. Mm-hmm. So anybody who thinks it's not Star Trek just isn't watching and isn't listening. Just the littlest things like having a Vendorian show up from, we had a TAS reference last week. We've got another one this week. We know we're going to get another one because of what we've seen in the coming attractions. That's love of Star Trek. And I think it's fantastic that we have people working on the show. And so far, so good. They're 2 for 2 in my book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
I mean, gatekeepers are 0 for 17 on this. And it's like, just open your mind, open your eyes.
Absolutely. So, Kasey, what do we got coming up next week, my man?
Long-range scan of planet complete.
Well, let me tell you. Next time on Discovering Trek, we'll continue 23 straight weeks of new Star Trek with the 3rd episode of Lower Decks titled Temporal Edict. That's right, Edict. Well, the crew seems to face a crisis aboard ship, and time is not on their side. Thanks to Boimler, that turd. Until then, remember that you can subscribe to Discovering Trek by searching for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere fine podcasts are found.
Yeah, I don't talk like that, so...
No one does. No one does. I think Kasey's getting paid by the second.
I'm just going to list over some of these S words. Plus, now you can support Discovering Trek and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network by subscribing to bonus content on Patreon. Get access to the unedited audio of all our podcasts and a lot of other perks.
Listen to us more.
I think the only hot mess on our network right now is this one right here. We'd like to take a moment to recognize the following amazing producers of Discovering Trek. We are so thankful for their support. Ken Tripp, Charlie Mulvey, Chris Trabuzio, Craig Ewing, Jackie and Chris Hackney, Leonel Marchand, Matt McGonigal, Mike Bovia, Sean O'Halloran, Peter Craig, Ken Bird, Jamie Rogers, David Hood, Rachel Delaney, Kyle Castillo, Chaz Bradshaw, Kimberly Hartman, Christina Werther, Steph Lescue, Jim McMahon, and the lovely and talented Jess Fashon.
If you would like to support Discovering Trek, and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network, beam on over to patreon.com/trekgeeks today, where subscription levels start at $1 a month.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The low, low price of $1. Of course, for more great Star Trek discussion, please check out the other podcasts from the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. Let's see, there's Politirex, Rewind, 5-Year Mission, and the brand new Infinite Trek, providing even more discussion on Star Trek Lower Decks every Tuesday. To find all our podcasts and where to download them, visit trekgeeks.com/listen. The Trek Geeks Podcast Network. No one talks Trek like we do.
Well done, everybody. My goodness gracious. Another great discussion has come to an end, my friends, and it doesn't matter if you're in engineering, sickbay, or security. We're happy you've joined us as we talked about Envoys. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing co-hosts, Sara, Kasey, and Bill, for joining me here, and we really can't wait to get together next week as we sit down to discuss Episode 3, Temporal Edict. Until then, grab some gok, some blood wine, some good friends, and never stop discovering.
Music for Discovering Trek is provided by 5 Year Mission. They're writing an original song for each episode of Star Trek. Hear more of their music at 5yearmission.net. Discovering Trek is a production of Coconut Media Works. Executive producers Bill Smith and Dan Davidson. For more great Star Trek discussion, discover the other shows of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network at trekgeeks.com or find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.